Okay, Jai Hind to all. This is Santosh Mishra and I am working in Ajay Kumar Garg Engineering College, and here I am in Information Technology Department. Today we will try to understand and implement what the servlet is, how can we use this servlet to collect the data from the user, process it and send this data to the database. So let's start. Today topic is very important and complex topic, so you all must understand it properly. I hope we will implement. I hope you all will understand how to implement servlet, how can we execute it, how may we deploy it, how we can fetch the data from the user processed by the servlet as a controller and send back it to the backend database. Okay, so this is the overall objective of today class. So let's start by directly moving to the my Eclipse framework. So to implement this concept, I will use my Eclipse framework, and in this Eclipse you will first, whenever you want to make some dynamic project that reside on the web, in that situation we will create a web project. Otherwise, if a standalone project is there, we will create core Java projects. So we will, to create a dynamic project, we will click on file, then new, and after that we will click on web project. If it is a standalone project, then we will click on Java project. So I am clicking on the web project because I wants to tell you about the servlet and I want to code it here. So I am clicking on, we will click on web project, then you will give a name to this project. I am giving it the name as live class. The project name is live class. So I am finishing it, click on finish, and then here the directory structure of the web project has created. If you want to create a servlet, then that servlet will be reside over this src folder, and if your HTML page is there that fetch the data from the client side, that HTML page must reside on the web root. We will understand all this concept very soon. If you want to create a servlet, click on src folder and then new, and then click on servlet. I repeat, click on right click on src folder, then click on new, and after that click on servlet. It is asking for the name of the servlet. I am the name of my servlet is data save. Let's say the name of my servlet is data save. So there are a number of methods listed over here. As you all know, the data from the client goes to the backend in two ways, either by the get method or by the post method. If the data goes to the backend, if it is processed to the servlet by get method, then the form data are appended to the URL, means it is displayed to the URL, so your data is not secure. And when it is goes to the post method, then the data goes to the directly in the form of the parameter of the service method or do post method. So according to our requirement, we will either check on do get, create do get, or create do post. I am clicking on create do get method, means I am trying to implement the get method. Now click on next and here click on finish. So you can see that your servlet has been created automatically by this myeclipse, and you can see that there are a number of packages being imported according to the requirement of the servlet. If you want to implement a servlet, HTTP type servlet, then we will import this package javax.servlet.http.http servlet. Since there may be chances of happening of exception, so we have imported this servlet exception class package also. Okay, and we can directly import javax.servlet.star, javax.servlet.http.star, and this way to create. Firstly, let's understand what the servlet is. I am opening a notepad, and here in this notepad let's understand what is the servlet. What the servlet is. Servlet is a server side components. It's a server side program. When a program reside on some web server, then that program is called servlet. Servlet is a server side component, server side program that is used to process the client request and process that and generate the result dynamically. Means whenever you want to create a dynamic web project, in that situation the static thing from the client will come from the HTML, and that HTML part will be processed by the controller, that is done by the servlet, and servlet process the client request. Whenever the client wants to access the servlet, it will send the HTTP servlet request, and servlet process that request, generate a response and send back the processed result in the form of HTML to the client. Means whenever the client request is there for the servlet, it comes in the form of HTTP servlet request object, and whenever the servlet process the result, it send back the response to the client through via the HTTP servlet response object. So servlet is a server side component that is used to generate a dynamic web project, and inherently whenever client wants a servlet, it sends the request in the form of a HTTP servlet to the server. Server process that request, and if the requested servlet is there resided in the server, then server execute that servlet, create the response, process the request of that client, create the response and send back the response to the client in the form of HTTP servlet response object. This way MVC architecture, model view control architecture are also implemented. Since the client request is coming from HTML, that is view part, the servlet is working as a controller part that is processing the client request and generating the response. Servlet works as a controller part, and model is the backend database. Means this servlet is interacting with the client view part as well as the backend model part, and it controls and communicate the client to the backend part. So this servlet works as a controller also. So to implement the MVC architecture, model view control architecture, we generally use this servlet. So I hope you all understand what the servlet is. Whenever we want to deploy this servlet to the web server, to the server, there are certain hierarchy that the server has to follow. See, so whenever we create a dynamic web project, in that time the Tomcat itself create that hierarchy and we have to follow that hierarchy only. So what the hierarchy is? The first thing, you have to create your controller, your servlet in this src folder. You have to create your HTML part in this webroot folder, and this webroot folder contains a web inf folder. In this web inf folder there is a XML file web.xml, that is also called a deployment descriptor. I will come to this deployment descriptor very soon. So we created a servlet, and whenever since I named my class as data save, so let me enhance the font size also. So your data part, your data, let me enhance it, then we will move ahead. Okay. So let us again increase its font. Okay. Whenever we enhance, we create a servlet, the name of the servlet we have given is data save, and whenever we create a servlet, it extend a HTTP servlet class that inherit, means our class has now inherited the life cycle method of this HTTP servlet. Any servlet have its life cycle explained by three methods: init, service and destroy. Init method is used for initialization of the servlet. Service method is used to implement the working of the servlets. Whatever service the servlet wants to provide are implemented in the service method, and that service method inherently called the doGet method or doPost method, depending upon from what method the client data is coming to the servlet. If the data is coming from the servlet by the get method, then this service method call doGet method, and if the data is coming from post method, then our servlet service method will call doPost method, depending upon what type of request is coming from client, either it is get request or it's a post request. So whenever we extend a HTTP servlet to our class will automatically inherit all the life cycle method of this HTTP servlet, and the life cycle method I have explained: init, service and destroy. Destroy method, whenever we terminate the servlet, the destroy method is automatically called. So here this has already been generated. I have told you, since from the client I want to send a request in the get form, so I have overridden this doGet method, and at the time of creation of the servlet I have checked that doGet method. That's why this doGet method has been overridden over here. So this doGet method have two parameter: HTTP servlet request object and HTTP servlet response object. So, and if there is servlet not found, then servlet exception will occur, and if there is some input output problem, then IO exception will occur, that has been thrown over here. So then I have set the content type by writing response.set content type text oblique HTML, means this servlet will send the response in the form of either text file or some HTML file, because the client only understand these two things only, text and HTML. Now I have created a stream, output stream from this servlet to the client machine, response dot by wrapping response dot get writer to the print writer object named out. So whenever means this out is a handle to the out client machine. So whenever we will write out.println, whenever we will write out.println, this out will move to the connect to the client machine. In here out.println, I have created a HTML page in writing double quote HTML head body, and I have written this is, and let me print here out.println out.print, and I am writing hello world. I am writing hello world. So this is hello world using the get method will be printed. Okay, I am writing this thing in our servlet to the output screen by writing it into a HTML form. I have this servlet is creating the response in the form of HTML because the client only understand the HTML or text things. So this way you can create your servlet. Now let's minimize the window. I hope you all are able to see it. Now you have created your servlet. You have created your datasave.java servlet. Now one thing you have to create this APIs of the servlet to implement, to use these classes, this HTTP servlet class and these packages. You have to build a path for that API of this servlet, and you can download this API. You can type Google on servlet-api.jar file. You can type servlet-api.jar file. You can download that jar file, extract it, and you will find you have to set the path for that. For setting the path of any library API, any API, you have to right click on your project, then you have to click on build path, and then you have to create configure build path, and after that you have to create and click on libraries, and after that you have to click on add external jar. Then go to the place where you have extracted servlet api.jar. I have already extracted this servlet api.jar file. You can see here it is servlet api. To select that servlet api.jar file, it's a executable jar file, you can see, and you click on it and open it. Now this jar has been available to this path of this jar file has been set for this Tomcat. Okay, after setting, click on OK and move ahead. Now you have set the path of your servlet. Okay, one thing you have to remember that whenever a servlet is executed, the file now come to the web.xml file. This web.xml file that has been created in the web-inf folder. Here this web-inf, this web.xml file is a XML file that contains the description of your servlet. So it has shown that there is a web-app tag, and this web app tag, this web-app is a tag, means it has opening and closing both. Now it has a servlet tag, and this servlet tag had servlet name and servlet class tag. The name of the servlet is datasave, and the name of the class of the servlet is also datasave. Then there is a servlet mapping class named within that servlet mapping tag there is servlet name and URL pattern. This URL pattern is very much important. To call your servlet, you have to click this, you have to write this URL pattern to your URL to call this. So I am copying it. I am copying this URL pattern. Now there is also a welcome file list tag, and this welcome file list tag has a welcome file tag in which there is index.jsp, means this index.jsp file will be automatically called, and if I delete it, if I delete this, then this index.jsp file may not be called. So here I can put some HTML file. I don't want this index.jsp file should be called, so that's why I have not mentioning any file over here. Now save this XML file. I have saved it. Now Ctrl S I have clicked. After that, so to execute this servlet, to compile and execute this servlet, click on your project, right click on your project, then click on run as, and after that click on my Eclipse server application, and it is saying that you have made some changes. I want to save it. So after that, this project will be executed, but you can see that there is no output. Why? Because to call that servlet, I have to paste that URL pattern that I have just called, that I have just copied. So I am writing this URL pattern, means before this you have not called your servlet. I have run the server, but I have not called the servlet. Now I have written this URL pattern, means I have called the servlet. So after clicking on this, you can see that your servlet where you have written this is hello world using get method. You can see here you have written in your servlet, you have written this is hello world using the get method. This has been printed to this by this servlet. Means this way you can execute, you can create and execute your servlet. I hope you all understand how can you create, compile and execute a servlet, how can you deploy the servlet. All of you I hope understand. Now let's move ahead. I want to create a servlet that take the data from the client by some HTML file, and then that data must be accessed by the servlet and then saved to the backend by this servlet itself. So I want to create a HTML file that contains, so HTML file has to be created on web root folder. I have already told you, you click on, right click on web root folder, click here new, and after that click on HTML, click on HTML. So it is asking for the name. I am writing the name as first page dot HTML. First page dot HTML is being created. So I have just click on finish, and in this finish here the HTML file will be created and open for you. This is your HTML file, and in this HTML file I am creating a, in this body I am creating a text field. I am asking name from, I want to ask name from the user. So I write name label, and here I have written input type equals to text and name equals to t1. So this name field will, text field will be created. After the name there will be like this, you can see it, on the browser it will look like this. Now I have put some line break, I have used br command to put some line break, and after that I want to have password from the user, password, and here I am writing input type equals to password, and here the name type, spelling of type is type, and then name equals to I have written p. After that I have put some breakpoint again, br tag, and after that I am creating a input submit button. Input type equals to submit, value equals to save. Let's say I am creating a save button. Okay, and this I am creating all this thing in a form tag, form open, and after this submit button I have created form close. Okay, let's understand a concept. I want that whenever this form is submitted, whenever I want to click on save button, the data field to this field, the data field to this field, whenever I click on save button, the data field in this field must be go to the backend, and that data will be saved to the backend by the servlet, some controller. So I want, if you want to save the data to some, you want to send this data to the server part, you have to write a action attribute of the form tag. You have to write action equals to, and in double quote write the name of that servlet, write the complete URL pattern, complete URL of the servlet that you are using. Means I am writing the URL of that servlet that will save the data from this page. Means the method I am using is equals to get. Means what I have done, I want to click on save button or submit button, and whenever I click the submit button, this form data will go to this action part by this method mentioned. Means this client data will go to this server, and the method for sending the data is get method. This way whenever the save will be clicked, then the control will go to this server, and this data may be accessed to this servlet itself. So let's move to that servlet. I have created a client page and clicked on save, and after clicking on save, this data will move to this action part, and let's move to that action itself. So come to this data save servlet. I don't want to create a HTML and all this thing, so I am deleting all this. Okay, I am deleting all this. So what I want to access the data from the client, so that I can save this data to the database. To access the data from the client, from this first page, I have to use, since I have told you that data from the client come from in the form of HTTP servlet request object. So to access the data, you have to use this request object. Request dot, there is a function name get parameter, request dot get parameters, and here I am passing the parameter T1. I want to access the data field in the T1 text field. Okay, and I want to store this data in the string name, or let's say n. I have accessed the data from the client by the request object, because I have told you whenever the client called a servlet, the client request by the HTTP servlet request, means the data of the client will come to the servlet by HTTP servlet request object. That's why I have called request dot get parameter T1. Okay, now this T1 has been, the value filled in the T1 has been accessed in the servlet. You can see it. You can directly write out dot print, you can create a HTML by out dot print. You can write in double quote, you can write in double quote HTML open tag, then out dot print, here you can write body tag, body, and in body tag you can print the message out dot print. You can write hello, then plus n, hello plus n. I am putting some spaces also here, then hello plus n means if the data from the client has been accessed in this n variable, and then this servlet is printing hello n, means dynamically it is accessing those data, means you can confirm by running this code that the data from the client is coming to this servlet. If it is running, then the data is coming, otherwise not. So let's run this. To, since I have used this first.html, so in the web.xml folder, in welcome file list, I am writing first page dot html, what will happen whenever the servlet will be called, whenever it will this project will be run, this welcome file will automatically called and the HTML page will be in front of us, and whenever we fill the data, click on save button, then this servlet, data save servlet will be called, and that will welcome to whatever we have entered. So let's run it again. I have click on right click on project, click on run as, and then click on my Eclipse server application. Yes, सेव करते हैं डेटा जो भी हमने लिखा है, and you can see that your servlet first page dot html will be automatically called because I have put it into the welcome file list. So I have entered, I am entering here Santosh, and I have not processed this password field, but still I am writing something. And whenever I will click on this save button, after clicking this save, the servlet data save servlet will be called, because in the action of this form I have mentioned that servlet, and in that servlet I have accessed this value and welcome it. So I am, after clicking, the servlet will automatically call, and you can see that hello Santosh is printing in welcome file. Is this HTML file I have called it, in this servlet. You can see that I have called this HTML, in within this HTML tag I have created a body tag, and after body tag I have printed it, and after that let's close this HTML and body tag itself. I am closing this HTML tag and this body tag, both has been closed. So you can see that whenever I am running it, I am clicking on run as my Eclipse server application, save the changes, and you can see that your server will be automatically called. First page.html will be automatically called. You can see that it has been called. I am writing here Santosh, and in password I am writing something. Click on save, and after clicking on save, you can see that thus this servlet that has been resided into the server side is accessing the HTML things, means this servlet is being accessed, all the data of the client are being accessed by this servlet, and once we have accessed this, we can now save this data to the backend, and this thing we will see in the next class. In the next class I will show you this data. We have in today class we have created a client page, we have created a servlet, we have seen how to access the servlet is accessing the client data, and we have implemented it, we have created the directory structure of the servlet also, and now this servlet is accessing the client data. What we have to do, you have to just to save this data to the backend, and for that the concept of JDBC is used, and we will see that in the next class. Okay, we will meet in the next class. Thank you, thanks a lot.